will start with our one and only gubernatorial candidate for tonight. That is Secretary Tom Perez, who is one of several Democrats running for governor in Maryland. He is an attorney who served as the first Latino chair to the DNC from 2018 to 2021. And you also may recall the 8 years he worked with the Obama administration, where he served as United States Secretary of Labor and as an Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Department of Justice. Secretary Perez also played an active role in Maryland politics, serving on the Montgomery County Council and as Secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor, Licensing and Regulation. Secretary Perez has had an illustrative academic career as well, serving as a professor of law and as a fellow at the Georgetown Institute of Politics and Public Service. He is a graduate of Brown University, Harvard Law School, and the JFK School of Government. Secretary Perez was born in Buffalo, New York. He's the son of Dominican immigrants and is married and lives in Tacoma Park. His running mate is Sharon Sneed of the Baltimore City Council. And with that, I'd like to pass over the microphone to Secretary Perez to share information about his candidature with us.
Well, thank you for your time, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone else. Please call me Tom. It's a lot quicker. We get more questions in. It's an honor to be with you. We've got 13 days till the election. And again, I'm Tom Perez, and the campaign journey has been a remarkable journey, listening around the state in every corner of the state. And I'm running for governor along with my running mate, Shannon Sneed, because we think Maryland's best days are ahead of us. And we are fighting for jobs, justice, and opportunity across the great state of Maryland. I've spent my entire career in public service. I'm part of what I call the GSD wing of the Democratic Party. I want to get stuff done. And I've spent my entire career doing exactly that. I was a career civil rights prosecutor at the Justice Department for the better part of a decade. I worked for Senator Kennedy for 2 years on Capitol Hill. I had the privilege of working in the Clinton administration and then serving in local government on the county council in Montgomery County from 2002 to 2006, where education was our #1 priority, and then serving under Martin O'Malley as your labor secretary during the Great Recession. And you know what? When people lost their jobs, we made sure they got their benefits in a timely fashion, unlike Larry Hogan. And then returning to the Obama administration, where I led the Civil Rights Division and then had the privilege of serving as your labor secretary. And I think the next governor is going to confront a multitude of very, very serious challenges. We've got to implement the blueprint for Maryland's future, the education blueprint. We've got 375,000 uninsured Marylanders. I want to get us down to zero, and I have a plan to do that. We've got a climate crisis. You know that. You live it everywhere in Dorchester County. You experience the impacts of extreme weather. But we have a broadband challenge, and we have a tremendous set of opportunities. We still have an opioid epidemic. We had more deaths last year than the year before, more deaths then than the year before that. We're moving in the wrong direction. And the next governor is going to have to be that multitasker in chief. And that's something I've prided myself in, is getting stuff done at a local, state, and federal level. And that's exactly what Shannon and I want to do as your governor. You know, there are challenges that we could have anticipated for a long time, education, and we don't have to reimagine the blueprint. What we have to do is implement the blueprint, and I will fully fund that blueprint because I want to make sure zip code doesn't determine destiny. I'm a proud public school parent, and my kids went through the Montgomery County Public Schools, and I want to make sure every child has the same experience we do. I want to make sure, again, that we are investing in our broadband infrastructure, that we're investing in our human capital infrastructure, and that we're investing in equity. Because as a civil rights lawyer, inclusion has been my life's work. And we have to understand that while we are the richest state in the country as measured by median income, we have remarkably troubling disparities, racial disparities among them. And as your governor, I'm going to make sure that we address those. We can't sweep that under the rug any longer. We must move forward as one. And I think we have a tremendous set of opportunities with the unprecedented infrastructure dollars we're getting from the federal government. And it would be really nice to have a governor who's worked really closely with the administration. That's exactly what I've done. It would be really nice to have a governor who's dealt with the emerging issues of the moment. And as a federal prosecutor, I actually was overseeing the prosecution of people who were attacking abortion clinics This is not new to me because I dealt with that in the Civil Rights Division. And the next governor needs to be steadfast in making sure that we memorialize a woman's right to choose. And having worked on that issue, I look forward to making sure I take the learning I did in the federal government and bring it to the state government. And so I want to turn to your questions, and I leave you with this. I'm very excited about where things are right now. It's a dead heat race between three of us. And what I am very excited about is that, we've been trending upward. I'm very honored to have had the endorsement of the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun. And I invite you, and hopefully Emma can put those two editorials into the chat so you can take a look at them. And they both said the same thing, that it's a large field and it's a very qualified field. But for both of those editorial pages, their choices were clear because Marylanders need a leader who can actually hit the ground running day one. And that's what I will do, working together and making sure that we leave no county behind. The days of Maryland where you just focus on 4 or 5 counties to the exclusion of others, that's a morally bankrupt strategy. And I want to make sure opportunity exists everywhere. And that's what I will do across the Eastern Shore, across to Garrett County, up to Harford County, everywhere. Every Marylander deserves to be able to realize their highest and best dreams. That's what you'll get if I have the privilege of becoming your governor. And I'm so honored to be with you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Let me ask if anyone has any questions, you can either raise your hand or put them in the chat. As you know, you're speaking to Dorchester County on the Eastern Shore. And while Dorchester has more Democrats and Republicans, it tends to vote Republican, as does most of the Eastern Shore. Many of us are very strong activists and trying very hard. We're also very afraid. And we're afraid for our democracy right now, for reasons I think you will know as well. We turn to our left and right. Our best friends and neighbors are Republicans, and it's hard to get a conversation going. Can you tell us as governor how you would be able to help bridge this divide and win the hearts and minds of a very conservative might not even be the right word, a very red Eastern Shore?
I think your question is really spot on. And I was looking at the data in the 2020 election. I think Joe Biden got, I think it was 41 or 42% of the vote in Dorchester County, notwithstanding the correct, fact that you pointed out about registration advantages. And, that's the reality. And, I am not going to be a governor for red Maryland or blue Maryland. I think the way we bridge these cultural divides is to focus on what unites us. The broadband crisis that we have right now, it's not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. And when we build out a broadband infrastructure, and let me be very clear in what I'm saying about broadband. I think broadband should be treated like water, an essential public utility that should be accessible and affordable to everyone. And when we attack that broadband crisis and build it out, Madam Chair, that helps everybody. If I asked for a show of hands, how many of you have been personally affected by the opioid crisis, I would be the first one to raise my hand. It's very difficult for me to talk about it 5 years later. We need to address that. The opioid crisis isn't a crisis of Democrats or Republicans, white or non-white, rich or poor, rural or urban. It's a crisis that touches every family or so many families, and it doesn't discriminate. I can attest to that. And as we address that issue, I think it's a way to bring Maryland together, and making sure that the blueprint is implemented so that every school is getting the resources it needs. I don't look at that as a Republican or a Democratic issue. I've always prided myself, Madam Chair, on the ability to bring folks together. And I'll give you just one story. In 2016, when I was your labor secretary, Verizon workers, 45,000 strong, were on strike from Maine down to Virginia. They've been on strike for 45 days. It was ugly. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't at the table. Violence was erupting. And I picked up the phone. I called the CEO of Verizon and I called the 2 union heads and I invited them to my office. Even though I didn't have any authority to order them to the table, I invited them to the table and they agreed to come and they agreed to get back to the table. And over the next 12 days or so, I mediated a settlement. It wasn't easy. I had to earn their trust. And we were able not only to settle that case, but you know what? 4 years later, they extended the contract because it was win-win. I think that's what leadership is about. That's what a governor should do.
I would like you to tell us some more about how you proceed on climate issues.
Sure. I think we are perhaps the first generation, Susan, that has a really complete understanding of the impact of climate change. And we might be the last generation that has the ability to do something about it. And what I would do is the following. Day one, and first of all, I know you've read this study, I'm sure, but we are no longer a leader in this area. And don't take my word for it. The Able Foundation had commissioned a report that was released, I believe, last December that said we are no longer leading on these issues. And the other thing about that report that's noteworthy is that if we're going to address climate change holistically, we have to understand that it is a whole of government enterprise. It's not just Maryland Department of the Environment. It is a whole of government enterprise. And what I would do day one is to appoint a climate and resiliencies coordinator. I got confirmed as labor secretary the same day that Gina McCarthy got confirmed for the EPA back in 2013. Gina McCarthy now serves in the Biden administration as that coordinator that I would appoint at a state level. And I've talked to Gina about what her role is. She's the traffic cop. She's bringing people together. She's imploding stovepipes, making sure that government's talking to each other, making sure we're developing metrics on how to comply with the recently passed climate action plan, making sure that we're building out all of the working groups that are called for in that, making sure that we're building metrics so we can measure what we're doing. We also have to understand that the next governor is going to have to work regionally, because if we want to address our water quality challenges, we've got to go north of the border, north of the Conowinga Dam, and understand that Pennsylvania is a huge source of our water problem in Maryland. We've also got to work with our farmers to ensure that we're doing sustainable farming. We've also got to build out our clean energy infrastructure. And I think one of the many mistakes that Larry Hogan made was slow walking our movement to clean energy. We used to be a national leader in the clean energy movement, offshore wind in particular, and we fell behind because Larry Hogan didn't lead. I will lead, and we're going to create good union jobs in the process. And so what I love about your question is it illustrates one of the many reasons I'm running for governor. This is not going to be easy. It's going to require stovepipe implosion within agencies. It's going to require unprecedented levels of collaboration with local governments, as well as with the federal government. There are 7 agencies, I believe, that have permitting authority on offshore wind. And we've got to understand how best to work with them. That's why I love your question, because this is existential. And I referred to climate and resiliency because it's not just climate change. We've got to address the here and now of impacts of extreme weather. And we've got to be on top of that. Just talk to, you obviously know what happened in Ellicott City, twice in 3 years, and you know what's happening on the Eastern Shore. So we have to have that resiliency as well. So that's what I would do in a nutshell.
Hard to cover all of environmental policy in a nutshell. Tom Perez, thank you very much for popping in this afternoon, meeting our committee, meeting our voters here. As you know, voting is underway.
Good luck tomorrow. Great. And a hello to my friend Anthony Brown, who I see just popping up.
Hey, Tom. Thank you.
Take care, my friend. Take care, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers. And thank you, Tom and Emma. I'm now going to introduce Anthony Brown, who has just shown up. I don't know if he, let's see if we can get him to show up on the screen.
Here I am.
There you are. If you talk, you show up. My name is Sarah Gavian. I'm the chair of the DCC, the Dorchester County Democratic Central Committee. We have several people on the line, and I'm going to introduce you and give you 15 minutes of time, hopefully half of it for your presentation and half for questions.
Well, Sarah, thank you. And hopefully it'll be maybe a third in presentation and 2/3 in questions. I want to apologize first of all in the background because I'm in a restaurant. We're out canvassing today, also launching some canvases. So I I took a pit stop in a restaurant, so I apologize. But first, let me thank you, Sarah, your colleagues on the Dorchester County Democratic Central Committee. I've always viewed the central committees around the state as really the backbone of the Democratic Party, helping to elect strong Democrats up and down the ballot. This is an historic year. We've got no incumbents running for our 3 statewide offices of governor, comptroller, and attorney general. And we know from polling that there are a lot of undecided. So I've certainly done my level of best while holding down a day job on Capitol Hill and working on some pretty weighty issues, being out there on the campaign trail. But it's certainly wonderful to be with you virtually. You know, the Office of the Attorney General, you're the chief legal officer of the state. I have nearly 3 decades of experience as an attorney. Many of you who know me or know of me, you think about my time in the House of Delegates. You think about my time as Maryland's Lieutenant Governor. You may know that today I'm a 3-term member of Congress representing parts of Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County. But many don't know of my years of legal experience. Legal experience ranging from state and federal cases, district or trial level and appellate. I've been involved in multi-party litigation, class action litigation. I've been in different types of litigation, some involving tobacco companies, taking on tobacco companies, some representing small Maryland companies against big corporate giants. I've been involved in litigation against the pharmaceutical industry, the financial services industry, the securities industry. And the reason why I say all of this is because when you think about the Office of the Attorney General, it's the largest public interest law firm in the state of Maryland, with responsibilities ranging from environmental law to healthcare, contracts and procurement, regulations. And you should look at the chief legal officer as an executive who needs to bring legal experience coupled with leadership. And I would also submit legislative and advocacy experience, because much of what the Attorney General does, and we see this done very well by Brian Frost, is fighting for changes in Annapolis, such as banning ghost guns off our streets, such as fighting for an increased budget at the Department of the Environment so they can conduct environmental inspections and take enforcement actions. So the Attorney General is not a trial lawyer. We'll leave that to our state's attorneys. The Attorney General runs a large organization of 450 lawyers and 700 professionals. So that's my broad experience. I think Maryland's a great state because what we as Democrats have been able to do, we've led the nation, although we haven't completed all of our work. But when I think of some of the work that we've done on the Climate Solutions Now Act, and there's still a lot more to be done. When I think what we've done in the area of police accountability after the murder of George Floyd, but there's still more work to be done. When I think about, and I know Tom Perez mentioned the blueprint for Maryland's future, that was, very difficult to pass that over to Governor Hogan's veto, equitable funding in education. But I can tell you right now, we probably have even a bigger lift in implementing the blueprint. And as Brian Frost demonstrated just this year, the Attorney General plays a very important role in interpreting the provisions to make sure that funding is equitably distributed across the state. So it's a great state. I think there are a lot of barriers that exist for many Marylanders. We see it in education. We see it in the environment. We see it in healthcare and housing. We see it in the workplace. We see it in policing and the criminal justice system. So I'm running for Attorney General really to eliminate those barriers, to make government work again. And I think Tom outlined well how the government, certainly we saw it broken during the pandemic. We were lagging when it came to unemployment insurance benefits. You remember Brian Frost refused to represent Governor Hogan, who did not want to disperse those federal unemployment dollars. He did get the governor alternative representation, which is a responsibility of the Attorney General. But it demonstrates that government doesn't work. So to get government and to fight for the changes that protect every person and empower every community. I understand that the chief legal officer of the state, the Attorney General, represents the state. And as a former lieutenant governor, I know that client very well, the state. But I know that the Attorney General works for the people. And having served in Congress and in Annapolis, I've advocated for the people, I've fought for the people, I've met people where they are. So I'll be the people's lawyer. And so whether we are tackling the rise in crime or improving public safety, whether we're addressing climate change or environmental justice, whether we are defending against assaults on women's reproductive freedoms. And I think we, have to certainly be forward leaning on that one, because Maryland is a solid state for our framework of protection, but we can't take that for granted. Whether we're protecting consumers or seniors or veterans, immigrants and refugees, and even the rights, voting rights and workers' rights and the rights of the LGBTQIA+ community. I'm going to fight for fairness. That's kind of the hallmark of my almost quarter century of public service, elected office. And then you can add on to that my military service, where I was an Army colonel, the only person in this race that's ever really managed legal professionals. I commanded a legal support organization of lawyers and paralegals providing legal services to soldiers, criminal defense, consumer protection, legal assistance. So taking all that experience together, and with my lived experience, I'm going to fight for fairness and equity on behalf of all Marylanders. And I ask that you, give me careful consideration. I know as a central committee you don't endorse, but certainly as individuals that you would be supportive and vote for me.
Thank you for that overview. And I think everybody knows to put up your hand if you have any questions. I see one hand at the moment. So I will, unless I'm missing something, ask Susan to ask her question of Mr. Brown.
Hi, Congressman Brown. I was on the Sierra Club political committee that voted unanimously to endorse you. You blew us away on climate. You were just so far above everybody else. And I'd appreciate if you could just outline some of your ideas for us here.
Sure.
Let me add that we do have another question coming.
Okay. So there'll be two questions, and I'll keep it kind of short. If you want me to elaborate, I'll do that. But certainly, look, the Attorney General has an important role. And one is the Environmental Crimes Unit. And unfortunately, that's limited, and I think it needs to be expanded. What do I mean by that? There are only 4 attorneys that are in the Environmental Crimes Unit, and they focus really narrowly on things like illegal dumping, illegal discharges, the intentional storage of hazardous materials. And what we've seen under particularly Republican governors is a lack of interest in enforcing the environmental violations that come short of criminal violations. So I'm going to be seeking expanded authority as the Attorney General, so that regardless of who the governor is, my office will have independent authority to investigate and bring enforcement actions when companies, whether you're agriculture industry, whether you're an industrial pollutant, are not complying with state and federal laws. I don't want to have to wait on the invitation of the Department of the Environment or the Department of Agriculture. Now, I'm confident that we're going to elect a governor, a Democratic governor, so we may not have that issue. But certainly Maryland's, from a public health standpoint, an environmental protection standpoint, it should not rely solely on the governor. I think also, and I'll be brief here, Brian Frost played an instrumental role in advocating for the Climate Solutions Now Act. I think they did a lot of good things when it came to commercial buildings. We've got a lot more to do. We've got to expand it to all buildings, new construction. We've got to do more when it comes to our transportation infrastructure. I mean, privately owned vehicles emit more, carbon than any other source, and we didn't do anything this year. So I'm going to be an advocate working with Sierra Club, working with other environmental groups to make sure that we're taking the next step so we really can accelerate our movement towards net zero. And so those are some of the things as Attorney General that I'll be focused on.
Thank you very much for that very clear answer. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Sydney Bradner-Jacobs, a member of our committee. She also has a question.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi, Representative Brown. Good to see you. It's 2 weeks until Election Day. Outside of virtual events, I have not seen the Brown campaign put up any signs in Dorchester or on the shore. Nor have I really seen the Brown campaign do any type of event here on the shore. Some people who I've talked to feel like your campaign has taken the shore for granted. Where have you been?
So I have been on the shore, and I have not been to Dorchester. I've been to Salisbury, I've been to Talbot County. I've been to the Upper Shore in Cecil County, and I'll admit one of the real challenges that I had, and I don't use it as an excuse, but I like to be candid because you asked me a very straightforward question. Is I'm on Capitol Hill 3 weeks a month, and voting on things like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. Trying to get the Build Back Better Act passed. I was very proud of the work that my office did in helping to reauthorize the Women Act. And I'll also add that in the gun safety regulations that we passed last week, and I know it kind of got hidden by our concerns about the terrible Supreme Court decisions on concealed carry and a woman's right to choose. But two of the three major provisions in that really originated in my office: closing the boyfriend loophole and enhanced background checks for gun purchasers under 21 to be able to look at their mental records and the juvenile records. And so I'm on Capitol Hill and really trying to get big things done. Again, I'm not offering it as an excuse, but I don't get to control this, like the floor schedule, the committee schedules, or anything like that. So that's been the challenge that I face. I sometimes wonder how my colleagues who are in these competitive races in Iowa or elsewhere around the country, I mean, how do you balance that? And it's very difficult to do. And so I just wanted to be candid. It's not because the shore doesn't matter to me. Many of you know that as Lieutenant Governor, I spent a lot of time on the shore, and certainly as your Attorney General, I look forward to being back on the shore with each and every one of you.
Fair enough, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Brown. We are very grateful that you are in the Congress from Maryland. We're very lonely out here on the Democrats of the Eastern Shore.
We tried to do that congressional redistricting, but the court didn't have it.
We did. We tried. But thank you very much. And we wish you the best in your campaign.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. We're going to move on now, just a couple of minutes behind schedule, with one of our local candidates. I'd like to introduce Susan Delean-Botkin, who is a candidate for the House of Delegates, District 37B. Many of you probably already know Susan Delean-Botkin from neighboring Talbot County, a graduate of Georgetown University. Susan has been a nurse practitioner for over 25 years and a resident of the Eastern Shore for over 30 years. For the last 2 decades, she's also been a small business owner, having built a family-oriented primary care practice called Family Care of Easton, which she tells me draws about 20% of its clientele from Dorchester County. Ms. Delean-Botkin has been very active in local organizations. She is currently president of the Board of Education in Talbot County, and she's also served as president of the Oxford Board of Appeals and president and legislative chair of the State Nurse Practitioner Organization. Perhaps that's State Nurse Practitioner Organizations. She has 25 years of experience working on legislation in healthcare, education, and climate issues, both at the state and national levels, and has frequently testified in Annapolis. She's married with 1 son, 1 stepdaughter, 2 stepsons, and 6 grandchildren. As I turn the mic over to Ms. Delean-Botkin to describe her campaign, I also want to ask her to briefly explain how we Democrats should approach voting for the 2 candidates that will represent District 37B, because that's confusing. Thank you, and over to you, Ms. Delean-Botkin.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to the committee. I don't think people realize how extremely important these events are, and it's to help us to really support our most treasured rights and responsibility, the right to vote. I'm going to address your question first because I don't want to miss out on it. District 37B is one of the largest districts in the state. It comprises all of Talbot County, majority of Caroline County, the majority of Dorchester County, with a piece carved out in the center that's a Democrat designated piece, and then a chunk of Wacomico County. There's 65,477 voters total in the area, and that area gets 2 delegates. And this is a very tricky thing, and I hope I will not prejudice you in any way by telling you how I think you ought to vote. there are going to be 2 Republicans that will be on the ticket in the general election. Right at this point, there are 4 Republicans, and they're going into the primary to pick 2. Those 2 people have to be from different counties. So there will be 1 Democrat. I represent Talbot, Caroline, Dorchester, and Wacomico is my plan. When you get to the general election, and I will be back because I'm almost every week in Dorchester County, I will repeat this. You can only vote for 1 person from 37B, and that's the Democrat, Susan Delean-Botkin. Otherwise, we will end up with the Republican. We're going to have it, but it may not be the person that you want to send to Annapolis. That person that we have to realize, we have not had a Democratic representative to Annapolis from this district in over 22 years. The people that we are sending from the shore tend to veto legislation on climate, on healthcare, on education. These are the sorts of things that we as citizens here definitely need to have. So why they are being vetoed here, but fortunately Annapolis is overriding that, just like the state legislature has been overriding Governor Hogan's decisions. So these are kind of the down and dirty things people don't realize that are going on, but which you need as an educated voter to know about. After following Tom Perez and Anthony Brown, I am not a speaker of their caliber. I don't have their experience. I am an action person, not a speaking person. As Margaret Thatcher said, you want something said, give it to a man. You want something done, you give it to a woman. So I thought I'd kind of jump in with two simple examples of what we have done just in the last 2 years. In Talbot County, we had a terrible time losing our deputies, our very well educated and trained, at $125,000 each. Sheriff Joe was talking to me about this in relationship to education issues. And I said, what do you need? And he said, we need to pay our sheriffs. We need to give them benefits. And I said, I find that hard to believe in Talbot County that we aren't paying our deputies. And he said, not only are we not paying them as well as Queen Anne's County, but Caroline County is getting our deputies. Dorchester County is getting our deputies. And so now we have a brain drain on the shore. So I thought about this for a while, and I reached out to our county councilman, Corey Pack, and I said, we need to put something together. And so we waited, and finally I said, Corey, I've got a little group together, and I think we need to get started. And that suddenly motivated him because we had gotten pretty conservative Republicans, business owners, the county manager, representatives from each of the towns, and we put together this committee to go through what we needed to do in order to have a referendum to raise our tax cap. This was not simple stuff. And I was able to lead that group to an agreement to raise the tax cap. And then we positioned ourselves and lobbied hard, and we were able to get the tax cap raised and the monies provided for our first responders, particularly our sheriff's department. And they got extra training, extra money, and they got benefits. So that's one of the things that I do. I look at the problem, I look at the stakeholders in the problem, and we work together to get something done. And I'm sure all of you had the pandemic panic. Mm-hmm. I own and work in a primary care health practice. When the pandemic hit, I knew I was going to die. I just knew I was going to die. But we held ourselves together. We gowned, we masked, we shielded, we did everything we were supposed to do. And we thought for about 2 seconds that we would close the practice because we couldn't jeopardize our health, which meant our children's health. We worked out a plan. We saw our patients outside in their cars, in the parking lot, under the portico. We saw any patient that needed our help. We called every one of our seniors. We made sure that they had medications, that they had lab work available if they needed that done. We actually found out if they needed food, and we saw that it was delivered to them. We saw their medications were delivered to them. So again, we saw a problem in our area. It was a serious problem because we have In Talbot County, about 60% of our population is over 65. I know the same situation here in Dorchester because not of your age group, but we did the same thing for our Dorchester, our Caroline patients as well. We made sure that they managed to get through this. Another very simple thing is over the last 20 years, as Sarah mentioned, when we see a legislative issue, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, or whether it's in climate, we work together with our stakeholders, whether it's the nurse practitioners, whether it's the Board of Education, whether it's the education teachers unions, to work to resolve the issue through legislation. One of the things, when I started this back in March, I had a very tight little list of all the things that I was interested in moving forward. And of course, that includes things like healthcare and education, public safety, housing, jobs, etc. So I'm going to give you a couple examples and then bump down quickly because I see we're running out of time. I don't know if you know what's going on in healthcare. We have lost 500,000 nurses in the last 2 years. If you go into any doctor's office, specialist office, or the hospitals here, you will find out that they are short-staffed on doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers. One of the first, and today I found out we're also short on lidocaine, tetanus shots, and certain kind of bandages we use in primary care. So one of the first things I would do as your delegate is designate a task force to find out where these people are going. How can we get our providers back? What do we need to do to get them to provide healthcare? This is serious, very serious. The next thing we would have to look at is the opioid crisis has kind of gone underground. And Tom Perez mentioned this. You don't hear about that as much as you're hearing about other things, but we still have the same number of people dying, people becoming addicted, and interventions that aren't being done because we're not focusing on it. Education. This was going to be a big plus for me because we had just gotten through the blueprint for education. We in Talbot County, and I know it can be done here in Dorchester, Carolina, and Wacomico. In the last 6 years, we went from a graduation rate of 85% to over 97%. And this is for Caucasian, African Americans, and Hispanics. We moved everybody up. We also managed to go from a 7% dropout rate to a less than 2% dropout rate in the same period. Again, this was spread across all our ethnicities. Now, with the blueprint coming into practice, what we have got is a tremendous benefit for all of our pre-K folks. We are going to have free full-day pre-K for almost all of our available children. Now, why is that important? I'm going to give, I think it was Susan asked about how are we going to get our people to work together to talk to each other. What I have done is I've gone out, Sarah did it. I've gone out into the community and I have small group discussions with between 8 and 15 people. I give them what my list is, ask them to rate that, but then I said, what's more important to you? And I heard a really tragic thing the other day up in Denton. A young mother, single mother, who also happens to be a business owner, has a young child, African-American child. And we were talking about the education system and how important it was to move forward. And she said, do you know what the prisons are doing for their planning? And I said, no. And she said, they're looking at the African-American population of third graders. And then they are extrapolating out for the next 10 to 20 years. And that's what they're basing their prison figures on. And I said, that's got to stop. This is where the blueprint works. This is where we need to put the blueprint in place. In addition, right here in Vienna, we have a group. It's not just a group, it's a business that has come in here and they are intentionally looking for African-American children and police officers. What they are doing is they are building the self-esteem of the children. They're working with the school system so that the kids are well educated. We feed every child in the school systems here on the shore. I don't know if you knew that. So we feed every child breakfast and lunch, and many children are sent home with backpacks for the weekend because they're also feeding their families. This gentleman in Vienna, Dwayne Dieter, I don't know if you've heard of him, put together this organization that brings police officers down, puts them through role training, trains, retrains, brings the children in, teaches the children how to interact with others, how to build on what they know and their new self-confidence so that they do have an interaction. They are taught how to work with it, to de-escalate it themselves. And then the police, I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. We have a wonderful community. We have a way of life that we do not want to lose. And as your representative, I reach out to everyone. I want to represent all walks of life, all ethnicities, and I hope that you will vote for me. Sorry took so long.
No, it's just that we won't have much time for questions. Justin, I see you have a question or a comment.
No, a question. I actually wanted to start off with one question for Susan. Susan, if these fine people want to support the only individual who was brave enough to step up and run for the House of Delegates in our district, how can they donate to your campaign to make sure you have the resources you need to get to Annapolis?
Do you want me to tell the truth, Justin?
Go for it.
First, I will give you the correct answer. My website is up and we are putting the Vote Blue button will be on there this week. So if you want to donate, you may donate in small amounts. When I registered for this and I started filling out all the brochures and that all of the different areas groups want, like the NRA contacts you, but so did Mothers for Safe Gun Control. I looked at that and I said to myself, if I fill this out the way I want to, I will not win on the shore. And then I looked at it again and I said, if I don't fill it out the way my heart leads me, I have no business being in this race. So that's when I decided I would self-finance. And if anybody wants to contribute 25, 50 bucks, that's great too. But I am not taking big money just because I have to vote my conscience. I have to represent you and you have to know where I am coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we will thank you there and leave it there and move on through our evening. I'm sure we can come up with many more questions. We have had a chance to talk to Susan before, and we'll get another one again as we plan events and start canvassing for our candidates. Hope I haven't missed anyone who had a burning question, but we do need to move on. So thank you, Susan. And now I'd like to check that she's online. I believe she is. Do we have Delegate Sheree Sample-Hughs here? Yes, we do. And
yes,
Sheree, thank you. And I'm going to introduce Sheree and Delegate Hughes. I apologize, Sample-Hughs, and let her rip. So Delegate Sheree Sample-Hughs is running to retain her seat representing District 37A in the Maryland House of Delegates. Her tenure started in 2015, and she has served as Speaker Pro Tem since 2019. She serves on many committees, including the Health and Government Operations Committee and the Joint Committee on Behavioral Health and Opioid Use Disorders. And we've heard a lot about opioids tonight. Delegate Sample-Hughs has also served in leadership roles in a number of caucuses in the legislature, including as Secretary of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland, on the Executive Committee of the Veterans Caucus, and on the Executive Board of the Women Legislators of Maryland. She also serves on a number of non-legislative committees and commissions. You're very busy, Madame, including the State Council of Cancer on Cancer Control, the Rural Maryland Council, the Board of Directors of the Maryland Patient Safety Center, the Work Group on Rural Health Care Delivery, and the Virginia Jones Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Council. Ms. Sample-Hughs has a long track record of public service, serving a list of local organizations too long to cover here, but including the Wicomico County Council from 2006 to 2014. She's a longtime resident of Salisbury, earned a bachelor's degree in public relations from Delaware State University and a master's degree in public administration from Wilmington University. She's married with 2 children. I'm very proud to present Delegate Sheree Sample-Hughs. I'm going to ask you to, we're going to give you 15 minutes and ask you to use about half of it to describe yourself and your campaign and leave us some time to ask some questions if we may.
thank you all for being in this meeting today. And I'd just like to say thank you again for your continued support of my candidacy. Again, this would be my 3rd time, but certainly the years of time that you put in to keep me abreast of what's going on in the district. and then also being a fighter for the things that we believe in, which in turn helps me stand stronger and stand firm with the Speaker of the House and other leadership members to know that I have the support. And so going into this next election, my mindset has been, and it will continue to be, is that what's important to me is to hear directly from the voters what the concerns are, what we need to address. Although on a daily basis, I certainly get those phone calls and emails serving in this capacity now, but you know, times have changed in the last 4 years, and the temperature of politics have changed in the past 4 years. And so I'm finding that more people are wanting to talk about what's going on and what's happening nationally all the way down locally. And so to that end, I'm certainly taking in that information and working towards that goal. My time in the House of Delegates certainly has been extremely fast, but it's certainly been rewarding in the sense that any issue that comes through and it's Eastern Shore related, then all of my 140 colleagues are saying, does Sheree know about this? Is she okay with this? What needs to happen? And that's for, you know, just trying to look at all 9 counties' concerns. So it certainly is an undertaking. I cannot wait to have a helpmate from this Democratic side. And so we can continue to move our message, our values, and the needle forward. I currently still serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, which led me to the ability to serve our area in particular with specific healthcare policies. It was just mentioned just a while ago by a previous candidate that, you know, healthcare is very much critical to our district, to our state, but we also have to think outside the box and figure out how we can incentivize or make new opportunities. What I'd like to highlight is that one bill got passed that dealt with the ability for physicians to take under their wing incoming physicians, and it's called the preceptor program. And with that being said, those physicians then are required to serve in a underserved community, and making sure that they are, you know, a part of the community, but keeping that talent and keeping that knowledge base there. And Dorchester County has actually benefited from that. And the physician that is the senior mentor, if you will, then gets a tax credit. And so to that end, that's a helpful way to address some of our disparities in access to care and beyond. So I'm just, you know, very excited that that is taken on a different level of programmatic initiatives. We had an advisory board put together in a bill a couple of years ago that required stakeholders to sit down, get together, and let's figure this out. Let's look at other states like Alaska and Massachusetts who've successfully expanded it to include, you know, other medical care professionals. So I look at a problem from all different angles. Certainly a lot of them come with tall orders, but when I fight for the Eastern Shore, I make sure that I have my homework done, the information, and certainly have those persons at the table. If I could just shift to climate change, because that's going to be an ongoing conversation probably to the day we die. But right now, it is certainly hot on the table, literally, where we need and have to continue to fight. One of the areas I was able to do this year to really move the needle was to work with Senator Hester out of Howard County, and that was to move the resiliency bill forward, which means that there is now a state office that is going to be able to work directly with municipalities and counties to apply for federal grants, maximize the funds so we can address the flooding and climate change issues. It was certainly nerve-wracking at the end of session, worried about whether or not the bills were going to get through, but thankfully they were. And so with that being said, it's very important for us to know that while we may be, if you will, numbers-wise in the minority of representatives from the Eastern Shore, we do and still have a strong voice. When I look and talk to our senior citizen population, it makes me know that voting for tax relief policies for them. So this session, we were able to pass pieces of legislation that deals with property tax credits for renters, because that's often forgotten, as well as persons with disabilities. And so it's important for me to be able to share that information, for me to be able to, again, fight for those most vulnerable populations, but then also figure out how do we make this economy work in the areas that we are dealing with at this given time. And with that, heavily working along with the speaker to make sure that that voice is heard. I think that in moving into the next term, I would support, making certain that we continue to have those community conversations. I had a small one in Dorchester County, probably about 3 weeks ago now, and then I'm over about a month and a half ago in Wycomico County. And each one of those meetings were informative to understand what the needs are. Again, hearing from persons of all walks of life. I know I had a gentleman that is the director of the Salvation Army, and he spoke, specifically about the needs, the infrastructure needs there. And so was able to, once again, bring back funding for the district and making sure that we have bases covered as much as possible. And so with that need and being aware of it, I was able to do the same in Dorchester County for Macy Lane's project, the intergenerational center for Delmarva Community Services. So I plan to stay the course in fighting for policies that make a difference, bringing back jobs, opportunities, and making certain that our democratic values do not, they don't become unnoticed. And I think oftentimes it is difficult to make sure that those values stay a priority in working with the majority Republican, actually all Republican Eastern Shore delegation. But I just know that it's worth fighting for, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And there we go. There we go.
No, let me, if I
And
may.
you know what's ironic about this is that I had that Eastern Shore broadband bill 2 years ago, and we passed it. We got things implemented, and broadband is becoming now a reality more so in our rural areas. And it's funny thing on today, I don't have like internet going on, but that's those are the, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, we can see you now, but I do want to give people a chance to ask questions if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to say that we've watched you in situations where you are the sole Democrat representing us, and we have 3 others until Susan Delean-Botkin gets elected. But I just want to thank you because the questions I've watched you, for example, the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce, when they do the legislative things, and they ask questions, and you'll get the boom, boom, boom Republican, and then you, with great courage and elan, will give a more nuanced answer than they will a Democratic answer, but also more nuanced. And I just want to appreciate you for working in that environment and really doing the research that you do because it shows very well. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you're unopposed as a Democratic candidate right now in the primary, but you do have a Republican, am I right? You have a Republican opponent and a general. But to others on the call, 37A, if you're in Ms. Sample-Hughes's district, is a simpler district. You just vote for one or the other when you get to the general, and we know who we're voting for. But so it's not complicated like the way 37B is. So I just wanted to clarify that for people. I think I only see one question. If I'm missing any, let me know, but I will ask Susan Olson to pose her question.
Yeah, it's me again. Sheree, I just want to thank you so much for the awesome job you did this year and every year before then. And I wanted to tell you, you probably know this already, the EPA is giving grants to some priority counties. We can get 25 electric school buses and $15,000 to $20,000 for charging infrastructure. And Dorchester County is a priority county, so is Carolyn and Somerset. So we'll probably be asking you for help because, our school board isn't always on top of things, but we're in the process of presenting that to the school board now. So I want to make sure you knew, because we've talked about it so many times and whether the tour was ready. So it looks really good. So
Thank you,
Thank you.
Susan, for highlighting that. Is just to elaborate on that a little bit more, in this climate solutions policy that was put forth, it requires electric school buses. Right now it's in form of a pilot program, but it will require electric school buses for all jurisdictions. And my concern with that has been, and my husband owns school buses as well in Dorchester County. So financially, a lot of your contractors can't afford a $400,000 school bus, and neither can the school systems, come think of it. And so the federal grants and the assistance that comes through is definitely necessary. But the federal government is really going to need to provide that level of assistance. And we as leaders are going to have to get ahead of the curve and make sure that our county officials are aware of, like you said, the funding, but then also aware of where the state policy is heading in these next few years. Because as I indicated, our individual contractors can't afford $400,000 school buses, and we don't have the infrastructure in our communities to do that. So with that being said, we have to make sure we get that federal level support, because otherwise it's going to be extremely difficult to even get our kids to school.
Thank you very much, Delegate Sample-Hughs. And we wish you the best of luck. And we will be right there to help you when you need canvassers and telebankers and all of that. So please let us know what we can do to get past this primary.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience with our Wi-Fi problem in the neighborhood.
Thank you for trying to
Have a
resolve it
good
for the
night.
rest of Dorchester County too. Cheers.
Yes, ma'am.
And with
All right.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to move on to the next part of our program, because we have quite a lineup here, and welcome Naomi Hyman, who is a candidate for Maryland State Senate District 37. In fact, she's Dorchester's sole candidate for that seat, the seat that is currently held by Addie Eckert. So there's none of this 37A, 37B. You just go in there and you've got a standard District 37. Naomi Hyman has worked as a professional adult educator for over 40 years in settings ranging from large corporations to small community-based organizations. She holds a degree in political science and is a certified National Democratic Training Committee trainer, as well as a skilled facilitator. Ms. Hyman has over 30 years of experience as a volunteer for Democratic initiatives and candidates. She is currently vice chair of the Talbot County Democratic Central Committee. Ms. Hyman grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood outside of Pittsburgh, the daughter of a small business owner and a homemaker. And I'm sure she'll tell us how that has influenced her approaches. She's married with stepchildren and grandchildren. Naomi and her husband have lived in Queen Anne's and Dorchester counties and now make their home in Easton. With that, I hand the microphone over to Naomi. As I'm sure you've heard me say, we'll give you 15 minutes, and if you can limit your comments to 7, we'll then open it up for questions. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And Dorchester County Dems, thank you for everything that you do. You're making such a difference for everybody on the shore by the work you do. And I know that believe me, I know as a Central Committee member, it can be frustrating and discouraging. Keep going, it's worth it. And I am so grateful for the work that you're doing. Thank you. Now I have a story for you. So an old man died, and is often the case when an elderly person passes away, there aren't that many people to come to the funeral. So when it came time for the funeral, there were a few people scattered throughout the congregation, and the minister gave his talk. And he said, look, I never had an opportunity to know Mr. Smith, but you have, and I want to make sure that somebody who knew him can speak for him before we lay him down for his final rest. Nothing, not a word is said, not a smile is cracked. He stands there, says nothing, waiting, still nothing. Finally, one of the old men in the back stands up And with his walker, he slowly makes his way to the front of the room. He comes to the microphone and adjusts it so he can speak into it. People are interested now. They look up. He leans into the microphone and says, his brother was worse. Now, I feel like that joke says a lot about the race that we're in right now for District 37. You've got better, you've got worse, and you've got much worse. And I hope I'm going to make the choice easy for you. I was born into a Holocaust surviving family. I grew up with a passionate commitment to social and economic justice born of the biblical prophets. And I guess you might even say, hyper awareness of the dangers of fascism. My grandmother was the only one of her family to make it to the United States before the Second World War. She came quite early, and she had her family here long before the war. And my mother was a teenager when the letters started coming from her family in Europe describing what was going on, where before they had been about family events and the like, now they were about the increasing difficulty of the laws that were passed and how scary they were becoming. And my grandmother begged them to come to the United States, promised them that they would sponsor them, that they would make it okay. But they always wrote back, no, it's not going to get that bad. Well, one day the letters stopped and we never heard from them again. They didn't believe it could be that bad, and we're in danger of believing that it can't be that bad here as well. And it has happened in the United States before, and it can happen again, and it may be starting already. Scapegoating is an old tool used by people who want to redirect your attention away from what's really going on and put the blame on other people. But the truth of the matter is, what they're trying to distract us from is the fact that they aren't doing anything to fix real social and economic problems. Problems like a lack of affordable housing, problems like the growing impact of climate change, which you in Dorchester County know more than almost any county on the Midshore. We've got crumbling infrastructure, and where it's not crumbling, it's inadequate, and that includes roads and bridges and sewage systems. And as we all just saw with Sheree, internet, okay? But no, let's blame other people for that, and let's turn our attention. And oh, while we're at it, let's get all of you Democrats and progressives worked up about the fear so that you're so busy focused on that you too are not paying attention to what's going on. Well, I'm paying attention. And as District 37's new senator, I will make sure that all Marylanders are protected from attacks on basic rights and freedoms, and work hard to repair the damage done to the Eastern Shore by years of neglect by our own representatives, and to establish a solid economic foundation that benefits everybody, not just a few. Now, I want to leave most of my time for folks to ask me questions, but I do want to close with a few words written in 1946 by the German Lutheran pastor, Martin Niemöller. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak. I promise you with every fiber of my being that I will stand up for you, whoever you are, now and always, and I hope that you will stand with me. Thank you, and I would love to take your questions.
Naomi, thank you for the moving words and telling us through story and not through long lists of all the bills and things that come in front, because essentially we vote for someone who will represent us morally and energetically in these halls of power. And we can't really get obsessed with all the little details as we go into that. Again, I want to comment that Naomi, many of you may know, but Naomi is a very brave woman. She stepped into this race, but we had no Democratic candidate. We dragged her in and she took it. But more importantly than that, she went from being kind of standing Democratic candidate to a candidate who is going to win this race and is determined to win this race. And I urge everyone on the call to take very seriously her candidature and come in supporting her when we get to the time between the primary and the general, when she will really need us, because she's in it to win and we need her to represent us.
And we can win. We can win. We have enough registered Democrats to win. Thank you.
So we'll work together to deliver that.
Yes, we will.
Many hands, Naomi. So let me not babble much at this. I'm going to start with Dorothy. Please introduce yourself, Dorothy, to Naomi as well. Dorothy, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Thank you, Naomi, really from the bottom of my heart for stepping up for us to this, task. It's not easy and it takes a lot of guts and a lot of chutzpah. So I'd like to ask you, as a relative newcomer of only 4 years, I came here wondering how we could cross the racial divide and how both the poor and the slight, I wouldn't say the super wealthy, because Dorchester isn't filled with super wealthy, but how the poor and the richer and the different races that we have here can kind of work together, and how we can try and work on the violence that's happening in our streets, and the fact that people don't have housing, all of it contributing to the same mush. And I'm sorry if I'm not being more articulate, because it all comes together in my mind. Is there anything from the position that you'd be in that would help that divide?
Well, thank you for a great question, Dorothy. I really appreciate it. And it didn't sound like mush at all to me. And it's the kind of thing that I think about all the time. In Dorchester County in particular, there's a long history of trying to find the diplomatic way to say it, but there's a long history.
Turmoil,
but even more than that, mistrust between various parts of the community. I have a friend who from Talbot County that just moved to Dorchester County, and he's having a hard time settling in because things still feel to him really segregated, not just segregated by race, although that's still the case, but segregated by socioeconomic level and segregated by neighborhood. And he even segregated been here's from come here's. So and while I'm using a Dorchester specific example, it happens in all of the counties of District 37. And as long as we have people who aspire to leadership or who are in leadership that are using racist dog whistles like Delegate Mouts is, it's going to be very hard to break through that. It's going to be very hard to gain that trust. It's going to take a lot of listening. It's going to take a lot of shutting up on my part. And it's going to take a lot of accepting that I don't have the answers and listening to the people who have ideas and seeing what's possible and trying wherever possible to have inclusive events where people can talk. It's a long road. We have a long way to go, but I think it starts by acknowledging it and acknowledging that we need to find in small groups ways of beginning to bridge those gaps. Legislation isn't going to do it, although it can help. But leadership can really help. Leadership that genuinely cares about everybody and that genuinely reaches out to meet with every group, that can help.
Thank you, Dorothy, for an excellent question, and Naomi for wrestling with it with us, because it really does weigh us down in Dorchester County, and as you say, across this region. We have very little time left. I am going to pass the mic over to Sid if you can keep your question short and response short, we can possibly get to a third.
Perfect. Hi, Naomi. Your opponent, Addie Eckert, claimed in January that Dorchester County's top priority is to allow golf carts on the roads of Hooper's Island and Taylor's Island. What's your response to that?
My response to that is to bring up the fact that the only piece of legislation that my other potential competitor had passed was to allow turkey hunting on Sundays. So what I would say to that is you need a leader who needs to take a real look at what is needed and work on priorities that are real to everybody, not just turkey hunters and people who want to drive golf carts on Hooper's Island. Thank you.
Question, quick answer. Thank you both. Susan Olson, again, a quick question. if you
Okay,
can.
I'll be quick. Naomi, your speaking of the Holocaust is so moving, and that's a subject that's very important to me. I'm concerned that the Holocaust is not being taught in our public schools, which is and maybe Susan could probably let me know later a little bit about that. But it's kind of senseless because at Salisbury University, they train teachers every summer in how to teach the Holocaust. And I was wondering if you knew anything about that, or if you could see, same thing with critical race theory, reading Black writers. I don't think they're doing it.
It's part of a whole package of things where we don't want to, where there's a desire not to talk about difficult subjects. It can come from very good places of wanting to try to protect children, but it can also come from trying to protect a certain kind of mythology about the role of white people being saviors, and to dismiss stories that reflect other people's experience. It's not just the Holocaust, it's not just critical race theory, it's America's own genocide of Native Americans. And until we find a way to grapple with that, to talk about it, and to grapple with it, I think we're going to be stuck in a similar situation where we are now. What I can do about it, it's up to local school boards. I can just be a passionate advocate for it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Naomi.
Sure.
To folks on the call, we've had Zia and I joined a meeting with Naomi and her team to talk about the kinds of things the DCC can do to support Naomi, and I will share some of those in our upcoming meeting. And Naomi, please keep the lines open where you can. Let us know, and let me ask you the Justin question. Where do we go to support you and contribute to your campaign? You can pop.
You go to the very difficult to remember website of naomihyman.com.
Great name, that was great.
Yes. You can support me, you can join my mailing list, you can send me questions, and I will put the URL in the chat in a moment.
Perfect, thank you very much. And to everyone on the call, we have two more candidates tonight to present. The next one is Zia Ashraf, who is a candidate for the Dorchester County Council, District 5. But also important, well, let me say, in that race, he is running against 3 Republicans and 1 independent. So he's unopposed in the Democratic primary, but then really gets quite a, gets it in the general, because there'll be one Republican at that point and 1 independent. He's also a candidate, as others on this call are, for the Dorchester County Democratic Central Committee from that same district. And in that race, he is running unopposed. In order to help us with the 2022 election cycle, Mr. Ashraf joined the current DCC a couple of months ago and is currently supporting us as vice chair. Mr. Ashraf graduated from the University of Maryland at Salisbury, where he earned his BA in political science, no silence, please, and international relations, with 3 minors in philosophy, conflict analysis, dispute resolution, and South Asian studies. Since then, he's been studying at Delaware Law School. This summer, he has a job at the Chester County District Attorney's Office, that's in Pennsylvania, where he's doing a lot of commuting. But when he gets there, he does legal research and writes appellate briefs, as you can imagine. Okay. He's passionate about politics, only 24 years old, he already has interned with multiple state and federal agencies, including Maryland Lieutenant Governor's Office, Maryland Secretary of State Office, and the United States House of Representatives. Mr. Ashraf was born in Pakistan and moved to the United States with his family in 2014. He lives in Federalsburg, a bit to the north of Hurlock, but still in Dorchester County. So we're very glad to call him one of our own. And Zia, if you could take a few minutes to present your candidature and then give us a chance to ask some questions, 15 minutes max. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for such a kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Sarah have mentioned, I have a bit of political experience, especially here on Eastern Shore. I have worked with different candidates here in the past, just to better understand the shore, the needs of the shore. And me and Sarah were talking. I signed up for this race. Basically, we need more young and fresh representation on the county council and fresh ideas. It's time to move on. As we all know, we are facing internet broadband issue here, environmental challenges, economic challenges, and then the housing equity issues here in Dorchester County. So as your county council representative, I would ensure that I would listen to every single voter, regardless of which party you guys come from, and certainly open to any ideas. And also transforming the county council to 21st century needs, like I would be accessible via Zoom and other technologies that are out there. And the last thing I would say, being my 8 years here in the United States, it wasn't an easy transition. And as a second language, as an English second language learner, it wasn't an easy job to be a first one in the family, to be a college graduate, and then moving on to the law school. I know everyone has been speaking their experience so far, why they are running for the office and so on. The only thing I can say is Dorchester County Council is not a rocket science. All you need is a common sense solution for the issues we are facing. And I would request your vote and consider me for as your candidate to vote for. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Zia, for that brief overview. I would like to say that Zia participated in the Chamber of Commerce's forum, a couple of weeks ago. And if you go on the Chamber's website, you will see they asked all those candidates the same questions. And so we set a specific questions, which he answered there if you want more information. There you go on that. And that our committee will be, even most of us are not obviously in CD5, but we will be supporting Zia in his efforts to phone bank and canvas and get signs. So Zia will be sharing information with us about what we can do. I know that Catherine, our data expert, is also working with him to get MD Van lists and targets pulled together. So we know that's tough competition out there. Zia has told me that's about 2,000 Republicans to 1,000 Dems. I got the numbers on the wrong, not the right numbers, but the right proportion. But only about, I think, Zia, you said 500 to 600 people generally come out to vote. So with a little bit of strategic planning, we might be able to target them and get some of them to vote for Zia and show that there is a Democratic presence in this county.
The one thing I would like to add is we know like there are 3 candidates from Republican side, and regardless of who wins the primary from the Republican side, David Beverly, he's a conservative. He's just running as an independent, so he doesn't have to face anyone in the primary. So if we consider the equation, they would be breaking up the Republican voters. And if we bank on our voter, there is a chance we can win this district. That's the only thing I would like to add.
Excellent. Zia is always helping me with strategy. So thank you, Zia. He's very focused on different roles and numbers and votes. And I think that we can do that, Zia. I see one question from Susan Olson. Susan?
Sorry to be talking so much here. But anyway, Zia, Dorchester County is like the canary in the coal mine for climate change. We've seen so many terrible things already happening with saltwater intrusion and flooding and you name it. And I was just wondering, what kind of policies do you think we could pass in the county council to help us with problems resulting from climate change, like property destruction and stuff like that?
I think that's a great question, and the way we can resolve this issue, I know we have been getting a lot of pushback from our local farmers. I think the first thing we need to do is a lot of educating to those particular farmers, and also in incentivizing those options for them, like the chicken nutrient pollutants that go to the Chesapeake Bay and all those sea level rising issues and stuff like that. We need to educate them about those, because most of the farmers are Republican there, so they do consider that as a partisan political issue, but that is something not valuable for us as a county. So I think in the educating them and incentivizing those options for them to avail those opportunity, and also like Secretary Tom Perez said, doing more sustainable farming option that everyone is doing around the world and particularly around the nation. I think those are some things, some of the things or some of the options we can do on the county council.
Then I will thank you for your presentation, Zia. Do keep us all informed of how we can support you. Stop wiggling your camera. Thank you. You're losing you here. Thank you very much. And yeah, good luck. And we are behind you. And I will move on to our last and very important candidate. So I would like to introduce the Honorable Teresa Wheatley, who was appointed she's running for Register of Wills. She's currently sitting in that seat. She was appointed Register of Wills for Dorchester County in November of 2020, when the judges of the Orphans Court appointed her to replace Doris Lewis, a beloved Dorchester Democrat. And they've been working together for years. Fortunately, Mrs. Wheatley had been working in that office for about 20 years at that point, and was well prepared, as well prepared as one could have been for the challenges of the pandemic that hit pretty much just as soon as she got into office. Previous to her tenure in the office of the Register of Wills, Mrs. Wheatley gained years of professional and administrative and legal experience. At the age of 17, she went to work in the law office of Senator Frederick Malkus as a legal secretary and later an administrative assistant in his Annapolis office. After 23 plus years with Mr. Malkus, she went to work for the law office of Wilson and Collison. Now it's called Judge Brett Wilson and Robert S. Collison office. She was there for 3 years and worked and primarily focused on probate and real estate work. Mrs. Wheatley is a pillar of Dorchester's Democratic Party. I'll let her tell us when she joined the DCC, which was long before I joined in 2019. She is no longer on the committee, but she's an active member of our Democratic Club. And from Dorchester herself, she knows how to work with those neighbors who don't always see eye to eye in the polling booth, and often shares her insights with me. So I thank you, Terry, for that. And
Thank you.
Ask you if you would present your candidacy and the structure of your race to our group.
I am a longtime Dorchester County resident, lived here all my life. I'm a graduate of Cambridge High School, class of 1972 with a business degree. I am married to my high school sweetheart. We will be married 50 years, July 23rd. And proud parents of 5 sons who have all graduated from Cambridge, South Dorchester High School and gone on to graduate from college. And the grandmother of 6 now. I served in various capacities with school and sports activities, been very active with their boys' lives all throughout, and a member of the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce, and have been very active with the Democratic Club and the Central Committee. I have worked in the legal field. I graduated in June at the age of 17. Went married in July, went to work for Senator Malkus in September, and have worked in the legal field for over 50 years. So I bring all that experience with me for this job, and I hope to keep the integrity, the compassion, which is very important in my position, working with families dealing with a loss, and the confidentiality of the office. And I am seeking to be elected to this position for the first time. Missing Doris Lewis terribly. I worked very closely with her, and she was an outstanding Democrat for Dorchester County.
So much that the club got renamed for her.
Yes, yes. Very active.
Tell us a bit about the structure of your race. I think you're unopposed as a Democrat, but you have a Republican challenger.
I do have Republican opposition. Someone who has never worked in the field, to my knowledge, has no knowledge about the office. And it's like everything else with the state of Maryland. All probate work used to be black and white, and now we have a lot of gray area. And if you don't have some knowledge in it, it's very hard to administer. You have to have that knowledge. And I can't imagine someone coming in the door with cold feet.
Got it. Thank you. Are there any questions in the room for Terry Wheatley in her race for Register of Wills?
I look forward to everyone's vote.
I see a question from Dorothy.
Okay, fine.
Take it away, Dorothy.
Hi, Terry.
Hey, Dorothy.
I'm just kind of wondering, how do you approach the fact that we're having so much trouble with county positions and so forth and so on? How will that affect your office, and how could we help you? And what do you think is the best way to start making the county offices work better?
It doesn't affect my office at all. I'm a state agency. Actually, my office is under the comptroller. So I have no county positions whatsoever. So I'm not affected that way at all.
That's what I was kind of wondering, whether the state and the county have to meld any of their work. You won't have to do that.
No, ma'am, I do not. No.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there other questions for Terry Wheatley? Terry, where do we go if we want to help support your campaign? Do you have a website or Facebook page?
I do not have a Facebook page. You could contact me personally through rtwheat@comcast.net. It's very expensive to run a campaign the first time, but I'm out there for any feedback or any questions.
I'm going to type that in the chat. You said rtwheat@comcast.
Comcast.net. Yes.
Right. So essentially you're running it yourself and people can.
Yes,
contact
I
you.
am.
Okay. Do you plan to have signs?
I do have signs out. Yes. I'm focusing more after the primary than I am right now. I need, because I have opposition in the general, so I just going to get through the primary and go from there.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
So with that, I actually want to thank all of our candidates, most of whom I think have skedaddled, and thank our participants. Thank you for your endurance and your interest, and have a great evening.